Go.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming out tonight to Extremely Controversial. We're showing two films from two very different periods, two very different films that both caused a lot of fuss. Freaks 1932. I have spent my career, my working career, working with people with various learning disabilities, physical disabilities, various conditions, illnesses, sensory impairments. 20 years ago, when I first left college and went into the field, I was actually shown Freaks as a positive thing by the director of the company as early training. I think other people in the field who I've met over the years would find that absolutely horrifying. Now, it is this dissonance, this ambivalence that cuts right down through the middle of Freaks, because it's sympathetically done, as you'll see from the title card, but it is playing on our discomfort at watching people who are different. Now, it is a pre-code movie, which means that it came out before the production code in 1933. It wouldn't have stood a chance of getting released after that. Okay, Todd Browning, 1980 to 1962. Freaks is now more widely titled Todd Browning's Freaks, and this is, I think, for two reasons. One is it gives the title a little bit more dignity, and it also acknowledges the director, because Todd Browning has kind of been forgotten over the years, and he's got a very, very wide fan base. A great visual stylist. He actually did not, as many sources will allege, grow up in the circus, but he did run away with one when he was 16, and he ended up acting. He ended up and he got into directing in the silence about 1919 with The Wicked Darling. Now, he became known for his collaborations with Lon Chaney Sr., The Unknown with a young John Crawford, Asylum, apparently that's an excellent film, The Unholy Three. These are just, he was very prolific, so these are just a few of the ones that stood out. Okay, this is Presumed Lost, London After Midnight, 1927, and it is the kind of the most sad film that is lost forever, absolutely. It does exist in a series of stills. What they've done is they have put it together with the original script using the stills, and they do actually show it like that, like you're seeing the whole film. But apparently the imagery, well, as you can see, is absolutely fantastic. Film in that day was filmed on nitrate film, which is highly flammable. So of course the studios, once talkie, this is an early sort of talkie, they just destroyed a lot of the silent movies because they were useless, nobody wanted to pay any attention anymore. And the ones that they did keep, like London After Midnight, all the studios had major fires in the 50s, 40s, and they just lost their entire back catalogue. The last print of London After Midnight disappeared on a fire on the MGM lot in the 60s. Okay, 1931, Universal Studios. Now, Universal Studios that year kicked off the horror film, the gothic horror film, with... Oh, sorry, man. With Frankenstein, 1931, James Whale, with Boris Karloff as the monster. Of course, a classic, an absolutely brilliant film. And a few months earlier, Browning's own Dracula, with Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Cementing for generations on how Count Dracula should appear. It's actually, despite the huge success that it was, it's not actually a very good movie. It's based on a play. It's a tiny bit too stagey. The Spanish language version that was filmed on the same sets during the night by completely obviously different casts. This was very common in the 30s. They would shoot foreign language versions by night. Is considered to be a lot better. That one can still see both of them. MGM wanted in on the act, and they asked Browning to come to them and direct something for them, which he did. Irving Thalberg, that was what the president of MGM, that's what he said to Browning. Now what happened was, shooting in the autumn and the winter of 1931, the film previewed disastrously in 1932. MGM forced Browning to make cuts totaling about half an hour. These are just some of the publicity stills. I am not discussing what any of the, for one thing, I would not call these people freaks now. I would never have called them freaks, call them by their name. But I'm not going to go into what their individual conditions were, but I will say that they were, there is no prosthetics, there is no makeup, they are people with real conditions, real disabilities. They were actually the more well-known at the time, and just to mention one, Prince Randian, he was actually, they were going to make a biography of his life. He was billed as the human torso. You will know him when he comes on. They were going to make a biography of his life in the 60s. In the 90s with Leonardo DiCaprio, but it never came off. A lot of the cast in Freaks, as I said, they were well known. They were well known, sort of like, you know, on the entertainment circuit on vaudeville. They were actually more fortunate than, say, I think some of the others who did have very, you know, miserable, exploitative lives. MGM were furious when they saw a rough cut, and predicting the wrath of the critics, disowned the film completely when it came out in February. It absolutely bombed. This was on Wikipedia, and I can't collaborate it, so I don't know if it's true or not, but allegedly a woman threatened to sue because she'd suffered a miscarriage after seeing it. Don't know whether that's true or not. Yeah, that was from Variety. The critics were not kind. Llewellyn Parsons. Now, I would argue, now, they toured it, when they sold it off to Grindhouse distributors, they toured it under that even more unfortunate title, Nature's Mistakes, and that was how it was known, more or less up until the 60s. Now, in Britain, it was refused a certificate on grounds of just being too horrible. We let it pass in 1963, 1964, which makes Freaks the longest standing ban on any film in the UK ever, over 30 years. And there were still objections from some UK critics when it was past X in 1964. It caught on again. In the 70s, with the rise of the midnight movie, which of course you were here for last month, we showed Pink Flamingos, of course, great night. These were all films that were original movies made during the 70s that played big, but there were also several movies that were older that found a whole new viewing on the midnight movie circuit, and one of the most important coming up, David Lynch's Eraserhead, which I know we've had requests for. We will get around to showing that at some point. Reefer Madness, of course. A 1930s marijuana warning film, absolutely hilarious, unintentionally hilarious. That really, really caught on, and so did Freaks, again at the time, because in the 60s, at this time, it was cool to be a freak. The counterculture audiences had changed. They were much more accepting. That's when Freaks really started to find its audience. You know, like urbanites just flocked to see it. Now, when I was researching Freaks, there was a piece in The Guardian in 1999, so you know, a little while ago, but they say that generally there is a feeling nowadays that it's not politically correct to show it. I wasn't aware of that. We'd already booked it. We have no wish to offend anybody, but it is available on DVD. Obviously, how you react to it is a very, very personal thing, but I would argue that it's very, very sympathetically done. And Browning does have scope, he does have ambition, and he does show you the positive aspects of this life. With about the half an hour trimmed out, makes the narrative quite weak. A lot of people have said that's because it's an early sound film, makes it a bit clunky. No, it's because this footage was taken out half an hour, removed, and that's lost forever as well. So that's why the plot might seem a bit, well, there isn't really one. But what is interesting is there's the little vignettes of how these people coped with their various disabilities back then. And that is very, very, very empowering, I think. Okay, in 1994, the National Film Registry every year invite 15 movies, and if you are invited, your movie means something, to be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, and they will preserve a copy. Freaks entered in 1994. So therefore, yes, you know, it's will always be preferred. Also, the Museum of Modern Art have got a copy of it as well. Like I said, I think you have to make up your own mind about it. A lot of people say that any good work that is done, just as an aside, is undermined in the last 10 minutes. Again, that is something that you will have to work out for yourself. It's very quick, it's only an hour. I'm going to have a quick break for that, have a drink, and then I'm going to be back to introduce Crash, which poor Elizabeth can't see.